So our next session is going to be a little bit different, but very fascinating. It's called Into the Deep, an accidental journey into the dark web. And please join me in welcoming Rosa Bransky, Director of Social Purpose at Flamingo, and she will talk about that.
Hi. What a pleasure to be here. My job is to understand people in their cultural context, in their own environment. Now, typically, this has taken me around the world, from rural India to urban Brazil. But increasingly, we find ourselves in virtual spaces, charting the changing cultures and shifting behaviors that define 21st century life online. Recent work has opened up a whole new space and culture that struck us as exciting, terrifying, and potentially transformative. In 2013, the FBI shut down the Silk Road, and the dark web exploded into the public consciousness. But what is it? Why are more and more users turning to it? And what are the implications? Now, the surface web, which all of us use routinely, consists of data that search engines like Google can find and then offer up a response to our queries. But just like the tip of an iceberg is only visible to observers, traditional search engines can see only a tiny amount of the information that's available online. The surface web, the bit that you and I can see, makes up just 4% of the internet. Now, a huge chunk of deep websites are dedicated to mundane topics. There's personal blogs, news sites, even a radio station. But of course, and has been widely publicized, there's also a darker side to the dark web. Exclusive, hackers, hitmen, and torture chambers for hire, said one newspaper headline just this week. The dark web has taken on mythological status in the popular imagination. But counter to what the popular press might have us think, users of the dark web cannot be consigned just to the realm of psychotic lone wolf or twisted masochist. In fact, more and more young people, average guys, are finding themselves pushed deeper and deeper into the recesses of the internet and seduced by all the possibilities that come with time spent in the depth. In 2014, for example, one site set up solely to purchase women for sex had 350,000 page loads originating in the USA in one day. But beyond the hysterical headlines, this really isn't a very well-known space. And we need to understand it, just as we would with any potentially damaging counterculture in the physical world. By understanding these spaces, and most importantly, how its users got into these spaces, we might go some way to stemming the flow. Now, a year ago, my colleagues and I knew nothing about the dark web at all. In fact, I was the joke of the IT department. As you've probably worked out, I'm not the typical image of an internet geek. We embarked on a project to understand the impact and ubiquity of pornography on American life and how it was driving more destructive behaviors. And we made some really striking discoveries. First, 2 facts to lay the scene. 97% of all Americans aged 18 to 29 regularly use the internet. 35% of all internet content in the world is pornography. Perhaps not so surprising. But what did strike us was the way that mainstream spaces are constantly nudging people into more explicit spaces. For example, Pinterest, Tumblr, and YouTube, everyday sites that we all use constantly, are the top referrers to Pornhub. In short, there is frictionless, seamless journeys through the web from mundane to explicit sites. Still the surface web, but explicit nonetheless. So the near ubiquitous access to the internet in the US has enabled niche communities who trade in this explicit content to establish themselves, grow, and thrive. Now, in these spaces, people quickly lose touch with the fact that anything they're seeing or sharing or creating is in any way bad or shocking because they're used to the fact that everyone's doing the same. 20 years ago, if I had a shoe fetish, for example, it would be quite hard to find someone else with a similar fetish. Really quite an effort to super specialize. Today, technology would indulge me. So as one expert told us during the research, in these communities, they rally around one another, offering comfort, validating each other's feelings and fears, and valiantly defending their lifestyle against attack by outsiders or creeping feelings of guilt. In the process, these communities have created a brotherhood like no other. Now, these toxic communities come to take up more and more of users' time. They're addictive. And they don't just normalize behavior, but they make behavior more extreme. The hit is not enough, the addiction peaks, and the user wants more. And of course, the internet is able to provide. In the depth, the more can be found, and the distorted communities on the edges of the surface are the perfect guide. With absolutely no IT skills whatsoever, and simply following the crumbs left by those whose journeys through the web we were tracking, we jumped down the rabbit hole too, and found ourselves in a world of cheesy pizza, or CP, a quite horrendous acronym for child pornography, and extraordinary and unimaginable levels of sex trafficking, and much, much more, not appropriate for this stage. In short, time spent in the depth took its toll. It would be so easy, in fact really quite tempting, to think of the users of these spaces as extremists. But for us, it became not that surprising at all to discover an average guy who interacts with his friends on Facebook, reads Bro Bible and Amazon forums, maybe finds himself clicking through to the more mundane end of the pornographic spectrum, back to an Amazon forum, and over to Reddit, where he starts spending more time. Back to Pornhub, where the searches become just a little bit more extreme. Back over to Reddit to share his experiences and alleviate any feelings of guilt that have developed in his travels. One of his online buddies shares a link to a fringe forum, which he stumbles upon one day, awakening a fascination he never quite knew he had. He hears talk of a place of more. Someone suggests he download a tool like Tor, which guarantees his anonymity to browse. It takes a matter of minutes, and suddenly he can access the deep web. Congratulations, says the landing page. Your browser is configured to use Tor. The browser looks not much different to any other browser. There's no flashing light or siren blaring. There's no friction. His journey from YouTube to Tumblr to Bro Bible to Pornhub to Reddit to the deep has been seamless. And perhaps not that surprising after all. Law enforcement and governments are investing more and more time and resources in cracking the dark web. But it's nebulous and ever-changing, and it's almost impossible to keep up. We cannot wage a war against the internet and win. And there are some real parallels here to be drawn with the war on drugs. We have spent over $1 trillion trying to eradicate drugs from our societies, yet the criminal market continues to grow. Countries around the world are rethinking their approach. Senior law enforcement officers are starting to question the idea that we can simply arrest our way out of this. And more effort is being made to understand the social and cultural drivers of addiction. A shift from intervention to one of prevention. And this is an approach we will have to take with the dark web as it takes on growing significance in American life, because we cannot wage a war with the internet and win. The dark web exists only in relation to the surface web and the behaviors that are forming and normalizing as all of us negotiate the parameters of identity and access and belonging in new online worlds. We need to understand the everyday spaces that are the primers for the deep web, and we have to teach young people how to understand and navigate the surface in order to stop them falling into the depth of the depth. Thank you.